Kia ora, e te whānau. It's so good to be here. I know a lot of times when I stand up here and I say, it's so good to be here, like it seems like it's like kind of trite, but it's not. Like I legitimately, wholeheartedly, absolutely love the privilege and honor to be able to share my heart with you today, to share more about this whole beautiful life, and to learn more about what Paul says to Titus. I have grown up in a Christian church, or a Christian family, in a Christian church. Yeah, that's good too, eh? To grow up in a Christian church. I remember just being at church every time the doors opened. We were there, it was back in the day when they did Wednesday night services as well. So it was like Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday. When I got old enough, I'd do youth group. And so I literally grew up teething on the pews, like from day one. And so I have, I'm really proud of that and really grateful for that, because I had this upbringing in a Christian home, in a Christian environment. But I think for me, what changed was there was a pivotal time in my life when I really understood what it meant to be a Christian and what it meant to live my life loud, proud, and with gusto for Jesus Christ. And in that, I remember a couple years ago during COVID, my granddad passed away. And it was really hard, but it was also beautiful because his celebration of life service was off the hook. I mean, there was 4 salvation messages given. There was people coming out of the woodwork because my granddad was somebody who lived his life. He had a beautiful life, lived it for Jesus. The day he got saved until the day he died, he was always talking about Jesus. And I remember bringing my friends over to the house, and my granddad he was legend for this, right? And I would have to prep my friends, and I'd be like, look, my grandpa really loves Jesus, and he's gonna make sure you do too. So he's gonna ask you about it. I'd prep him because I knew it. And I'd be just hanging out, and I'd see out of the corner of my eye, my granddad would grab my friend, and he'd pull him over into the room, and he'd just look at them and go, how's your relationship with God? Do you know who Jesus is? Do you know how much he loves you? And, time after time. And he would do that with my family as well. How's your relationship with God? And he'd have this heart-to-heart moment with them. He just loved God so much, and he loved people so much, and he knew the value of living his life for Jesus Christ and making sure that everybody was a part of that. And so that inspired me. I remember learning to drive. I would take him to work, and he would pray over himself every day because he went into a non-Christian work environment. And he would constantly pray the prayer of the whole armor of God. And he would put the armor of God on. And every day when I'd take him to work, because I wanted the car for the day, he would pray the armor of God over himself. What a beautiful life that he had. And it showed me that my life, there's a difference between really just growing up in church and understanding and knowing who God is and how much he loves us. And that's where the rubber hits the road. This was in my face when I was growing up, because I love life. I love living life. If there's something adventurous to do, I'm all for it. I used to tease my grandma because, when people would say to you, if your friends jump off a bridge, would you do it? And I'd be like, I'm the one jumping off the bridge. That's me, I'm doing it, And so I love life. But with that love, there was just this kind of recklessness that I lived in my teenage years. And I remember my friends and I got kicked out of youth group. I know, shock and awe, right? Because I'm such the epitome of holiness right now. But we got kicked out of youth group, but here's the thing, it wasn't anything scandalous, not in my opinion anyway. It was because we watched this show, Beavis and Butthead. Which, yeah, come on, I heard somebody, yeah, It's kind of it'd be like the South Park of today, pretty crude, pretty, just controversial in some ways. And so we were standing in the gym area. There was where we had youth group was kind of in a loft area. And the pastor, we had gotten kicked out, and they had this new youth pastor come, and he was like, hey guys, come up to youth group. And we're like, nah, we're not allowed, we got kicked out. And he's like, doesn't matter, just come up. And a few weeks later, he asked us to become leaders in the youth group. And I was like, well, this is a change. We went from like being kicked out to now being leaders in the youth group. And I was like, okay, cool, because I loved it. I loved church. I loved a youth group. And it was really awesome to have somebody who believed in me so much that they actually like put me into a leadership role, mentoring younger kids. Like, do you know we watch Beavis and Butthead? And he's like, yeah, I don't care. And so I was in the car one day with this young girl, and she was telling me her life story. I mean, just spilling her guts, all the trauma that she had, and she had some trauma. And I was sitting there listening to her story, and at that moment, it just struck my heart. And I remember thinking, God, I have nothing of value to offer her. There is nothing in me that is worth, anything without you. Because God is the thing in our life that adds value and hope and encouragement and love. He is that thing in us. And at that moment and that day, I think that's when I became a Christian. That's when I became a follower of Christ. Because I understood what it meant to love God and live my life for him in a way that would help other people to live their lives for him. There's a distinction between going to church and living out a godly life. And that's exactly what Paul is talking to Titus about. These verses, Titus chapter 3, 1 through 3, it's kind of like a before and after almost. And the title today for today's message is called A Beautiful Contrast, because Paul really believed that Titus needed to stand out in that community. And so he does this before and after thing. And so if you want to open your Bibles or your phone or whatever you can also read along on the screen as well. But I want to read Titus chapter 3, verses 1 through 3 for us today. It says, remind the believers to submit to the government and its officers. They should be obedient, always ready to do what is good. They must not slander anyone and must avoid quarreling. Instead, they should be gentle and show true humility to everyone. Once we too were foolish and disobedient. We were misled and became slaves to many lusts and pleasures. Our lives were full of evil and envy, and we hated each other. A before and after. So, how many of you guys in here like before and after pictures? If you're doing any kind of home renovation stuff, you look at the before and after, right? You see the walls that are all peeled and chipped and the disgusting carpet and, all these things that are changed. And then you look at the after, and it's like this pristine, glorious looking new place, new cabinets, new bench tops. Like the thing is just gorgeous. So I'm going to show a few before and after photos for us to kind of get the thing here that I feel like Paul was trying to get that before and after. And this whole sense of before and after, it wasn't to shame Titus or the people, the Christian community there. It was to magnify God's grace and God's glory. So let's show the first one, before and after. So this is the before of a house, raggedy, and this is really like disgusting, right? And then the after, gorgeous, love it, give me that house right now. The next one is teeth. I know, this was gross, eh? But the after, just stunning, right? I mean, this is what like cleaning teeth and teeth whitening does for you, apparently. The next one, such a cute dog. Then after, when he's had a little shave, I know, he's so cute. And then this is anybody know what this is? A hair tie, thank you. Anybody who has long hair will know that we all carry one of these around our wrists, right? So this is the old hair tie. This is after 19 weeks or 9 weeks of being used. And then the new hair tie, look at it, teensy, nice, but then it gets worn out and the old is definitely a billion times bigger. And then the last one is anybody who's a tradie or enjoys doing home renovations on your own. This is like the old version. This is the after. It's been used multiple times over and over again. And then this is the new version. So you can see how much different it is. And that's the thing about before and after pictures, right? It shows us the contrast. And a lot of times we don't really realize the before and after until we see them right next to each other. And that's the thing about the contrast between our beautiful life in Christ and who we were before Christ. And a lot of times we have to hold up those two versions of ourselves to remember who we were and who we are now, right? So I want to dip into the first verse in chapter 3, verse 1. And what Paul is saying to Titus here is he is talking about living beautifully in a broken world. We live in a broken world, right? You turn on the news and it's just disaster everywhere. And the world today and throughout history has been broken without Christ. But when we know Christ, there's that before and after of contrast. And so when Paul writes to Timothy, or to Titus, he basically, I have to give you the context, because to be honest, when I first read the bit that was like, submit to the government, I know, like, for me, it was kind of like, oh, there's so many, with my organization, we work with so many, like, Christians who are minorities in countries where their governments are not good. They're just not good governments. And so when you read that verse and it says, to submit to authority, it was a bit tricky for me to think through that. And then I looked deeper into what Paul was actually saying to Titus. So we have to take this into perspective to really get the gist of what Paul is saying here. So Titus was in a small island named Crete. And this place was known for basically debauchery, corruption, political instability, moral chaos. And the Christians there were this tiny, small community of believers. And so the first century, the Roman Empire, they were basically okay with religions in general, as long as those religions pretty much kept to themselves. And there was a bunch of people, like zealous people at the time, who were rising up against the government. And, there's a time and a place for that. It's not like we need to be these like passive Christians all the time, but that's not what Paul's talking about. What Paul was really urging Titus to do and the Christians to do at that time was to respect and obey the governing authorities, but not because they were being like weak. He wanted the believers to stand out, and not by rebellion, not by good conduct or civic integrity, but he wanted them to stand out because of their good conduct and because of their civil integrity. There's a difference. And that's the gist of what Paul was saying to Titus, is that you need to be different. It's not about blind submission. It's about showing the power of Christ that has the ability to change hearts and the culture marked by deception and self-interest. It echoes Jesus' teaching in Matthew when he says, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Paul didn't want this Christian movement to be mistaken for political rebellion, but he wanted this movement to be recognized for the peace and compassion and service. So there's this beautiful contrast of what's going on. It was Christians living differently in a world that was so chaotic, and showing that difference by the way that they lived their life. Paul opens by saying, remind them, because even mature believers forget. We forget where we've come from sometimes. And he lists the traits that should mark us as Christians: submission, obedience, readiness for good works, kindness, gentleness, courtesy. That's what it means to be light in darkness. And it's not these, when God gets into our life, he gets amongst us, it's not necessarily these dramatic miracles that need to happen. It's simply faithfulness. It's faithfulness to who he is and what he's done in our lives. It's this living in a chaotic world that is very self-sufficient and selfish, and living differently and being people who say, how can I be different? How can I make changes? And how do I live my life out so that people see that every day? It's about being the most trustworthy employee. It's about being the kindest neighbors. And it's about being the most patient drivers. For me, this is very difficult. I will just come out and say it right now. I am not a patient driver. And Barnabas Aid, I have to get my car branded, okay? So I have to have Barnabas Aid on the sides. And I'm thinking, I cannot drive around and be angry while I'm driving, right? Because now I have this thing on the side of my car that is going to say who I work for. And so what I've been doing is that instead of, when I'm in the right-hand lane and I'm cruising along and somebody's going 80 in front of me, and I'm like tempted to just be like, move, get out the way, Anybody with me? Am I the only one who gets angry at that? Because I feel like I'm the only one right now, but it is difficult, hey. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, why are you driving so slow? You're in the passing lane. You pass and then you get over. You get over, right, to the left lane. And so knowing that my car is getting branded soon, the inevitable has to happen, I've started just taking a breath and moving into the left lane behind the person going 70, right? And it has been amazing. It has been a transformation of my life because it's great not being so angry when I drive, because we're supposed to be different. We're supposed to be light even when we're driving our cars, and that's sometimes the hardest thing to do is be light when you're driving your car or be different when you're driving your car. And so getting into that left-hand lane has forced me to go, okay, I remember who I was and have a tendency to be quite angry when I drive, or now I'm in this left-hand lane and I understand what patience is. And it also just is a release because it's like, oh, this feels good not to be so angry when I drive, And it's been really cool, actually. It's a cool experience. So if you struggle with road rage like me, which I know none of you do, I can see the halos on your heads right now, I get it. If you do struggle, try doing these different things to just take yourself out of that. And that's what Paul is saying to Titus. He's like, bro, you live in a world that is just, it's dark. There's messy stuff going on, but how are you being different? What does the beautiful contrast in your life look like? It's about us being humbly submissive, not blind conformity, but willing to respect authority and eagerness to do good. A young missionary once said this: the hardest place to be a servant isn't in the slums, it's in the suburbs. Ouch. The hardest place to be a servant isn't in the slums, it's in the suburbs. Why? Because comfort dulls our compassion. Our wealth, our freedom, our opinions, they often make us less ready to do good. But Paul says to Titus, be ready for every good work. Be ready. Be ready. Be ready. There's something about that. Christian maturity isn't measured by what we know. It's measured by what we do. It's measured by what we do. And I'm not talking about good works like that get you to heaven. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being different. And people will see that difference in their life because of the way that you act, because of the things that define you. When you live as a Christian and you follow what the Bible says, you just do those things automatically. You just do good automatically when you let the scriptures really just saturate your heart and your life. I've been reading through the Bible in a year, and I can tell you that it has changed my life. Like, I read my Bible pretty regularly, but this whole thing of reading the Bible through the year has been just transformative for me because it really does change. And I'm reading it with a friend of mine, and we're talking all the time about, man, I just love this. It's like this, we're surprised by the fact that the Bible actually changes us. It's living and active, right? And that's what this whole beautiful contrast is when we start to really let this thing get into our hearts and we read it and we start to listen to it and we start to understand it and we start to just to let it guide our lives, then we start to live a beautiful life that is different from the world around us. And they will see that and they will question that and they will ask you why you're different. When was the last time somebody asked you why you were different? And I think that for me is a challenge. I'm not preaching to you guys, I'm preaching to myself. Doing this message was for me as well. And it's gotten into my soul and into my heart. So verse 3 is basically talking about this whole remembering who we were thing. When Paul talks, he says, we were ourselves were foolish, disobedient, led astray, slaves to various passions and pleasures. Before Christ, we were enslaved to ourselves. I think sometimes the church downplays sin sometimes. And sometimes I downplay sin. You see, we talk about like the mistakes we've made in our life. But in all actuality, we were slaves. We are slaves to sin before Christ. All of us hate slavery, right? You hear the word slavery, and what do you think about? You think about people who are trapped, their hands are bound. They can't live life for themselves. They are living in this constant state of fear. They are living where somebody is telling them what to do all the time. They are slaves. They are bound. Their hands are bound by chains. That's slavery. That's what sin does and what sin is. It's slavery. It's not just a mistake we made. It's not just a wrong thing. It just gets into our life and our heart, and it keeps us bound there. And it keeps us captive, and it keeps us prisoner, and it limits us for what God actually has for our lives. But what the power of the gospel does is it sets us free. Who we were. And there's a good thing about remembering who we are. It's that before and after thing, right? It's we remember who we were and who like that icky bit of us that now God, through Christ, has made amazing and beautiful. We can't appreciate grace until we have felt the weight of our guilt. The darker the night, the more glorious the dawn. Grace is only amazing to those who remember what it rescued us from. Grace is only amazing to those who remember what it rescued them from. It's like a swimmer. If any of you are swimmers or you go to the beach, you know that if you get kind of in those rip tides or something like that and you get washed out to sea, if a swimmer's like, nah, I'm good, guys, I'm good, and they just keep getting washed out to sea, it's only when they go, oh, I need some help, and they signal for help, and then they're rescued. But if they're just floating around and getting washed out to sea because they don't recognize what's going on, it's when that recognition of knowing that they're helpless and they need help. And that's where grace begins. It begins with honest desperation of us going, yeah, I need to live as a grace-made person. I need to start living that way. So if verse 3 is the before photo, verses 1 and 2 are the after. Kind of funny how he switches them around there. We would think before and after. We were, but he's talking about we were and who we are now. So the thing is that we're not just saved from something, we're saved for something. We're saved to display the character of God to the world. The gospel's not an escape hatch from hell. It's not. It's not just a get out of jail free card. It's a transformation into holiness of who God is and being carriers of grace. We used to just be consumers of grace, but now we're carriers of grace. And I think a lot of times we turn Christianity into a comfort zone when it's a calling. And that's where Titus was. He was in this place where there was a very small amount of Christians, and he needed to show them and guide them in how it was to live and be gentle in a harsh world. Corrie ten Boom said this: when Jesus takes your hand, he keeps you from sinking. And when Jesus keeps you from sinking, he teaches you how to walk on water. That's cool. Because he doesn't just leave us, he doesn't just take our hand and go, sweet, okay, you're good now. He teaches us how to walk differently. He teaches us how to be light in the world. And grace doesn't just save us from sin, it shapes us for service. The challenge here is to be the contrast the world needs. Titus, his church lived under pagan power, just as ours we live under secular comfort. Do you know, we're not a Christian nation anymore. There's 30% of people who claim to be Christians. 30%. And so we live in a very secular country. We live in a country that has grown accustomed to convenience. And we have to ask ourselves the question, are we marked more by outrage or by gentleness? Are we known for what we're against or for what we do for good? Are our lives so luminous that people glimpse Christ through us? So in a second, we're going to turn the lights out. In case you're like me and you're afraid of the dark, you think there's some power cut or something like that, just to know we're going to turn the lights out. And I think for us, we need to remember that like a candle doesn't fight darkness, it just shines. Yeah? So as the lights go out, don't be scared. A small candle doesn't fight the darkness, it simply shines. The world doesn't need louder Christians. It doesn't need us to be loud. It needs us to be bright. You see, when the lights go out in here, your eyes are focused on this candle and the light that shines. And that's how the world is with us. When we are Christ to the world around us, they see that light in the darkness. And our world is dark, and it's getting darker. There's just, come Lord Jesus. But right now, we need to be the beautiful contrast. This world needs to see us in our schools. It needs to see us in our workplaces. It needs to see us over the fence with our neighbors. It needs to see us on the road being this light that goes, come and find hope. Come and find peace. Come and find what God truly intended your life to be. Paul's logic was simple. Remember who you were. Without grace, there's no hope. That's where, 70% of our nation lives without hope. They might think they have hope. They might be good people, but they don't know true peace, and they don't know true hope. It's only through God's light. It's only through God that we are different, Remember who you were. Without grace, there's no hope. Reflect on who Christ is through humility, obedience, and goodness, and then radiate grace. Pass the light to the next generation. When my granddad died, it wasn't that his light was snuffed out. Instead, his light transferred into all the lives that he touched, including mine. The way that I love people, the reason I do my job, is because of that light that I saw in my granddad's life. And this is where you guys are to take this light, metaphorically speaking, and live so that people are drawn to you because of who Jesus is through you. That's the challenge for you today. Remember who you were, and remember what God did for us. Remember that beautiful light he puts inside of us. And take this out into the world that you live in and be different. Be that beautiful contrast, because the world needs different. My goodness. The world needs different. They need hope. They need to be able to have the joy of singing these songs. We sing them because they mean something spectacular to us. So be light. Take that light and take it and make generations and generations and generations of people who carry light into their darkness. Yeah? I'm going to just give us a time to digest here and think about that. You know, some people, maybe you're like me and you heard this message and it just challenged you to really get to the nitty-gritty of what's going on in your life and to really want to be light and darkness, to be a beautiful contrast to the world. And even the littlest things, you guys. That's the cool thing about God. He changes even the littlest thing so that we can be brighter. And so I want you to think about this. It's just going to be silent for a second, and we're going to sit in that silence. But think let God speak to you about what it is in your life that he wants to make brighter. If you are not a Christian and you heard this whole message about Jesus for the first time, or maybe you're thinking about becoming a Christian, then it's super simple. All we need to do is go, God, I remember who I am without you, and I want to be who you want me to be. And I want you to live through my life. And I want you to give me true joy and true hope and true peace. And I acknowledge you as my Savior. So let's just take a second and exhale in the presence of God.